Afternoon. Hello. How y'all doing?
Good, great.
Good. My name is William Souther, and I am one of the new volunteers, one of the newer volunteers. So it has fell onto my bailiwick of things to introduce our guest speaker. This is really a privilege for me. I've known this gentleman off and on for, what, a couple of years now? So I know a little bit about him, but some of the things I'm going to tell you today, I had no idea. It was a complete surprise to me. I have to say, you're utterly amazing. You really are.
Thank you.
You've done things that are still on my bucket list. All right. First of all, I was going to call him Dr. Moore. He said no, because he is a professor. Okay. So I'm going to call him Mr. Moore. Is that okay? Mr. Moore is really something else. He served in the Navy in 1968. He was an officer candidate at the Naval Aviation Officer Candidate School in Pensacola, Florida. I didn't know that. Taught Amarillo College for 46 years and retired as professor and program coordinator of the Modern Language Program, having taught German and French. Guten Tag, wie geht's?
Mir geht's immer gut.
Just enough to get in trouble. He has extensive background in European, American, and military histories. I didn't know that either. He served as a member of the World War II Commemorative Committee and was responsible for public education of the United States involvement in World War II and made oral presentations every 2 months from 1963 or 1993 to 1995, dealing with both the Pacific and the European theaters. Mr. Moore served as the last president of the Air Force Association Chapter 181 here in Amarillo between 2003 and 2006. I didn't know that. Mr. Moore was an avid military autograph collector. Keep that in mind. He has accumulated a large quantity of autographs spanning all the wars in the 20th century. He's corresponded with Americans, Germans, the British and Canadian veterans. Mr. Moore has made numerous trips to Western Germany, where he personally interviewed German veterans of World War II. He has interviewed veterans from all branches of the military service, some of which went world famous and held important positions in Germany during World War II. That's pretty impressive. So, without further ado, I present to you Mr. Robert Terry Moore.
Thank you. I don't know if I can follow up on a presentation like that.
Well, it's hard, I'm telling you, it's hard.
Well, thank you. I'm so glad you're here, and thank you. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here today and talk to you about this not too pretty subject. War is a terrible thing. People get hurt, things get broken. And this presentation is about war. You're going to see and hear things that may be very unsettling. But it's war. And the Normandy invasion is replete with instances like this. All the good sense, you out there. Thank you. Anyway, I'll get started with this, and thank you for your understanding for all of this. Anyway, this was the day basically when Germany lost World War II, June 6, 1944. Here's what it looked like on the 25th of July of 1944, just before the breakout of St. Lo. Give you some idea of the magnitude of this operation. Okay? All right. Operation Overlord, it was a code name for the largest amphibious operation in human history. It was a complex undertaking that was the beginning of a larger campaign that culminated in the liberation of Paris, France on August 25th of 1944. Given the enormity of the operation, I shall discuss the highlights of it only, including its conception, implementation, backed up with statistics to give you an appreciation of the magnitude of this undertaking. I will also discuss the leadership of both opposing sides and highlights of the combat operations and overall strategy which led to successful completion. Ever since the German invasion of the Soviet Union on June the 22nd of 1941, Joseph Stalin had been pressuring the Western Allies, namely the United States and Great Britain, to open up a second front to relieve the German pressure on Russia to knock it out of the war. At that time, neither country was prepared to carry out such an extensive operation to accomplish this. The main thing was lack of manpower, development of the required technology and landing craft that had yet to be fully developed. The earliest the Allies could implement such an operation would be in 1943, but even then, events were such that it was an impossibility to carry it out. Allied thinking at that time was to carry out operations such as Torch, the invasion of North Africa, Operation Husky, the invasion of Sicily, and then attacking Germany from the south by invading Italy, with the invasion taking place at Salerno, with the ultimate intention of knocking Italy out of the war. The Chief of Staff, the Supreme Allied Commander, or Cossack as it was called back then, began to plan the invasion to take place on May 1st, 1944. The initial draft of the plan was accepted at the Quebec Conference in August of 1943. It was determined that General Dwight Eisenhower would be chosen to lead the invasion forces for Operation Overlord, with Lieutenant General Frederick Morgan as his Chief of Staff, who along with his staff actually planned the operation. So let's take a look at Eisenhower's command staff. Eisenhower was the only Allied general capable and qualified to lead this operation. He had planned and carried out the operation to invade North Africa, Torch. He planned the operation for Sicily, and he was about to get involved with the same thing in Italy before he called England to take on this job. His deputy commander-in-chief was Air Chief Marshal Sir Arthur Tedder, who was previously commander-in-chief of Allied Mediterranean Air Force in the Mediterranean area. Lieutenant General Walter Bedell Smith was his Chief of Staff. As I mentioned before, British Lieutenant General Frederick Morgan was the Deputy Chief of Staff of General Eisenhower, but only in the sense as he planned the operation and the planning staff. A lot of people don't realize that General Morgan actually helped influence the partition of Germany after World War II. There was a British plan that was accepted, not an American plan, that led to the partition of Germany at the end of the war. Field Marshal Sir Bernard Law Montgomery, Commanding General of the Allied Ground Forces during the invasion. He was the victor of over the African Corps at the Second Battle of El Alamein in November of 1942, and was a British national hero. Lieutenant General Omar Bradley, Commanding General of the 1st Army Group. Say more about him later. Air Chief Marshal Trafford Lee Mallory, Commanding General of the Allied Tactical Air Forces. Previously, he was Commander-in-Chief of the British RAF Fighter Command. Admiral of the Fleet Sir Bertram Ramsay, Commander-in-Chief of the Allied Naval Forces. He was the officer that was responsible for the successful evacuation of the British forces at Dunkirk in May of 1940, in which 343,000 British troops were brought back to England. Now here's a color photograph of Eisenhower's command staff together. Now all of these photographs you saw that are colored, these were not colorized pictures, they were taken in color at the time. Okay. Now let's take a look at the Allied preparation dealing with why Normandy was chosen. The Pas de Calais, you see here, is the closest point between France and Great Britain, less than 20 miles. The Germans expected the invasion to take place here, and therefore heavily fortified this area. However, for the Allied commanders, this area offered few opportunities to expand the operation once the troops were ashore. And also the area is laced with lakes, with rivers and canals, and did not offer much of an opportunity to expand the operation. What they wanted was a flat beach, and Normandy here seemed to fit the situation. It's a 50-mile stretch of land that offered the Allies many options as to what they would do once the troops were ashore. They could expand or go in any direction they wished to. However, the only drawback here was the fact that it lacked port facilities. And that was solved with the mulberries, and I'll talk about it a little bit later. The Allied invasion plan. It's simple enough to understand what they want, but carrying out is another thing. Anyway, the Allies emphasized a seaborne operation, a landing, preceded by an airborne drop of the 82nd Airborne Division to capture St. Mary-Glees, and the 101st Airborne to capture Carentan, which is down here, not depicted. Once the beachhead had been consolidated with Omaha, these were American beaches, were united, they would join the airborne forces and capture Cherbourg. It was necessary to have a seaport to supplement the Normandy beachhead, simply because it could not sustain the tonnages that were needed here to support the invasion. And Cherbourg Seaport would supplement those tonnages. All that Normandy could support at the time of the operation was 6,000 tons a day, and they needed a lot more than that. Now, as far as the British and the Canadians were concerned, once Gold, Juno, and Sword had joined up or linked up, they'd captured Caen, which was a major communications city that had excellent road and rail connections. And once that was captured, they would go south to capture Falaise, and then swing left, and then go up the same river and capture Paris. Now, the airplane for the D-Day landing stuff, I don't have a map that shows everything that they did, but give you some idea of just what this is all about. Between April 1944 and June 6, 1944, the RAF and the British and the American 8th Air Force carried out 3,200 airborne low-level reconnaissance missions to photograph everything military: bridges, gun emplacement, troop concentrations, airfields, everything that was of military importance, even some things that weren't of military importance, including buildings and even terrain. To confuse the Germans as to where the landing would actually take place, they didn't just photograph this area, they photographed the entire European coastline. Now, get some idea about the forces that were arrayed against the Germans. This is mind-boggling. All of it you're going to see is mind-boggling. 3,467 4-engine bombers were available for this operation, 1,645 twin-engine bombers, 5,409 fighter bombers and fighters, and 3,500 gliders. A total of 11,521 aircraft. Fleet support, 1,213 naval vessels of all kinds. Transport vessels, 4,126, including landing craft. A total of 5,339 ships of all types. Ground forces. By the time of the invasion, America had 1,500,000 troops stationed in England, with an additional 2 million British, Canadian, and various other nationalities also available for this operation. A total of 3,500,000 men. 156,000 were landed on D-Day alone, comprising 7 infantry divisions, 3 airborne divisions, and 3 armored divisions, a total of 13 divisions. As I mentioned earlier, by the time of the invasion, or before the invasion was being contemplated, certain things, technological developments had to be completed before it could actually be carried out. And this was the American idea, and we'll look at the British ideas later on. But anyway, the landing craft that you see here with artillery and anti-tank guns were called LSTs, landing ship tanks. I mentioned the mulberries. This was an engineering marvel. There were 2 of these, each comprised of 76 blocks of concrete, each weighing about 9,000 tons each, that were towed across from British Isles and embedded into the seabed to form a breakwater to facilitate the rapid unloading of ships. As I said, there were 2 of them. One was at Omaha Beach. This is one at Gold Beach, or Arromanches. A storm came up on the 19th of June that destroyed the one at Omaha Beach that lasted 3 days. This one stayed in operation until the end of the war. Get some idea what this contributes to the operation. Or said by the end of the war, 2,500,000 troops have been landed here, 500,000 vehicles of all types, and 4 million tons of supplies. Came to this one alone. Another invention was Pluto, pipeline under the ocean. This consists of a 3-inch rubber pipe that was connected England with the invasion beaches itself to provide fuel for the tanks and trucks that was needed. Now let's look at the British contributions to these ideas. These were called Hobart's Funnies. These were all brainchild of General Sir Percy Hobart. As you can see, here's an American Sherman tank that was fitted with a flail device to explode or detonate unexploded mines on the invasion beach itself. It was very effective in creating exit lanes for the tanks, as well as avenues for the infantry to advance. Another one was a flamethrowing tank, the Crocodile, a Churchill tank fitted with a flamethrower device to suppress resistance from pillboxes and bunkers. The Armored Ramp Carrier provides traction for tanks, particularly over sandy beaches, as well as sand dunes and any other beach obstacle which you come across where it's necessary for a tank to try to overcome. The Churchill bobbing tank was pretty much the same thing, except this is for trucks. It laid a sheet of matting across the beach itself to provide traction for trucks. Duplex drive tank. This is a Sherman tank fitted with a sleeve that was inflated with compressed air and launched offshore and then propel itself to the beachhead itself. And once ashore, the tanks would be reactivated and then function as a tank. Most of these sank before it got to the beach, taking their crews with them. Oh, back. I'm not through with that yet. Okay. A couple more things to look at, then we get the Sherman side of this thing. Deception was absolutely necessary for this operation to be carried out successfully. A fictitious first U.S. Army group was invented, supposedly located in Kenton, Sussex, under the command of Lieutenant General George S. Patton. The Allies constructed dummy tanks, trucks, and landing craft and positioned them near the coast, as well as a broadcast of fake radio traffic. German radio messages from 21st Army Group were first routed to Kent via landline, then broadcast in the open to give the Germans the impression that most of the Allied troops were stationed there. Patton remained stationed in England until July the 6th, thus continuing to deceive the Germans into believing that a second front would take place at Calais, not Normandy. Another aspect of this operation that had to be considered was rehearsal. Training exercises for the Overlord landings took place as early as July of 1943. As the nearby beach resembled the planned Normandy landing site, the town of Slapton in Devon was evacuated in December of 1943 and taken over by the armed forces as a site for training exercises that include the use of landing craft and the management of beach obstacles. And this was done with live fire. A friendly fire incident occurred there on April 21st, 1944, resulting in as many as 450 American deaths. The following day, an additional estimated 749 American soldiers and sailors died when German torpedo boats carried out a surprise attack on the Salt Force U conducting Exercise Tiger. This is one of the dirty little secrets of World War II. This was kept secret for 43 years. Eisenhower and Bradley were present when they saw this horror unfolding. Eisenhower claimed a tight-lipped secrecy about this, and it was never lifted. It dribbled out over time, but by 1987, the details came out of this. It was an official U.S. Army cover-up. I can talk about that later if you like. Weather forecasting. Absolutely necessary. Weather affects every military operation under consideration. This is no different. The invasion planners specified a set of conditions regarding the timing of the invasion. A full moon was desirable, as it would provide illumination for aircraft pilots and have the highest tides. The Allies wanted to schedule the landings for shortly before dawn, midway between high and low tides with the tide coming in. This would improve the visibility of obstacles the enemy had placed on the beach, while minimizing the amount of time the men had to spend exposed in the open. By the evening of June the 4th, the Allied meteorological team, headed by Group Captain James Stagg of the Royal Air Force, predicted that the weather would improve sufficiently so that the invasion would go ahead on June the 6th. He met Eisenhower and other senior commanders at their headquarters at Southwick House in Hampshire to discuss this situation. After much discussion, Eisenhower decided that the invasion would go ahead. Everybody listen up to this point. There were a lot of D-Days in World War II. This one was really a real exception, a very tremendous exception. Operation Overlord was a masterpiece of planning, organization, and execution. Every detail was considered. Every contingency was taken into account. Everything was done to ensure the safety of the troops as far as was possible under the circumstances, while at the same time being able to inflict the maximum amount of damage on the enemy as was possible. That's the point of all of this. Okay. Okay, let's take a look at the German command structure. Supreme Commander-in-Chief of the German Armed Forces is Adolf Hitler. That's typical of a dictatorship. It's always the top politician that commands the military. Commander-in-Chief of the High Command of the German Armed Forces was General Field Marshal Wilhelm Keitel. His position would be considered the same as the Chairman of Joint Chiefs of Staff in this country. However, he was nothing but a rubber stamp for anything Adolf Hitler ordered. The real brains behind early German successes in World War II was Colonel General Alfred Jodl. He was the chief of the operations and planning staff. Commander-in-Chief West, now this is all of Western Europe, was Field Marshal Georg von Rundstedt. He was the most senior officer in the German army. Commander-in-Chief of Army Group B, Field Marshal Erwin Rommel, the famous Desert Fox of North Africa fame. Probably the one officer that the Allies respected. He was respected on both sides of the line for that matter, but the Allies particularly respected this man. And he had unprecedented access to Adolf Hitler that no other general really had. Commander-in-Chief of Army Group G, located in southern France, was Colonel General Johannes Blaskowitz. General of Army Troops Leo Guy von Schwettenberg was Commander-in-Chief of Panzer Group West. We'll talk about it a little bit later. I want to see what he looked like. Commander-in-Chief of the German Air Force at the time was Reichsmarschall Hermann Göring. Commander-in-Chief of the 3rd Air Fleet was Field Marshal Hugo Sperle. This was all of France, not just Army Group B or anything like that. He was 3rd Air Fleet comprised all of France, for that matter. He was a former Commander-in-Chief of the Condor Legion during the Spanish Civil War, that lasted from 1936 to 1939. Chief of the German Navy was Grand Admiral Karl Dönitz. His representative was Commanding Admiral of the Naval Group West, General Admiral Theodor Kronke. Now here's what the Germans had facing the Allies when the invasion actually occurred. Ground forces in the West, this is all of Western Europe. The Germans had 48 infantry divisions, 1 armored infantry division, 10 armored divisions comprising 1,552 tanks and self-propelled guns. A total of 59 divisions comprising 850,000 men. In France alone, there are 21 infantry divisions, 4 armored divisions, a total of 25 divisions to defend 1,000 miles. Invasion front on June 6, 1944, at the time of the landing itself, there were 6 infantry divisions present with 1 armored division. A total of 7 divisions to defend 150 miles. Now the Air Forces, a total of 419 aircraft. And the naval forces, there were 91 total naval units, comprising 78 motor torpedo boats, equivalent to our PT boats, and 15 destroyers. There is no way, with these statistics, that the Germans could actually stop the invasion with this number of aircraft or naval vessels. No way. Their only hope in defeating the Allied invasion was with their ground forces. Most of the air squadrons, fighter squadrons had been withdrawn from France and taken to Germany to defend against incessant Allied air attacks, which about this time were round the clock. And the naval forces that were available were bottled up in Northern Europe by blockade. There was no way they could be reinforced in these circumstances. Now let's take a look at the Atlantic Wall, the Bonnet Atlantic Wall. As you can see, the Atlantic Wall starts here on the coast of France and continues all the way up to Norway. It wasn't started until 1942. Rommel took up his position as Commander-in-Chief of Army Group B in November of 1943. There's a scant 7 months between that time and the invasion that he had supposedly strengthened this wall. Of course, casements had been installed there with some artillery, heavy artillery, but over time, many of them were taken out and sent to the Eastern Front for service. So many of them were just empty. Anyway, Rommel was of the opinion and belief that the invasion would take place here in the Normandy area, and therefore he concentrated on strengthening that part of France. He did 4 things. He had 5 million mines laid of all kinds, anti-personnel, anti-tank mines, even bouncy betties, anything with tripwire, anything that the Germans had in way of an inventory in their mines was laid on those beaches. Had he had more time, he planned to have 50 million laid. Anyway, he also had some steel tetrahedrons manufactured and installed off the beach to forestall any kind of landing from that landing craft. And also had installed some underwater, and also on the beach itself. He also identified areas that could be suitable for tank travel. He had those areas flooded. And for gliders, he had stakes put in the ground, wooden stakes that were called Rommel's asparagus to forestall any kind of light glider use. Now, there was a controversy that arose here. This played a tremendous role in how the battle developed. Although Rundstedt was commander-in-chief of all the forces in the West, one area he did not control were these tank divisions up here in the Pod Clay area. They were under the command of General of Armored Troops Leo Guy von Schwebenburg. And the ownership of these divisions was hotly contested. Rommel wanted those divisions as well as Blaskowitz and other army commanders. And so it took Adolf Hitler to intervene in this controversy, and he came up with an absolutely unworkable solution. He ordered 3 of those divisions sent to Blaskowitz in the south, 3 to Field Marshal Rommel, and the remainder to stay in the Pod Clay area. And he retained operational control of those divisions, and they could not be moved without his specific permission. That had tremendous consequences down the line in how this battle developed. Let's talk about the assembly of invasion forces. Troops for the invasion were housed in temporary camps all over southern England. A complex system called movement control assured the troops would be aboard ship and leaving from 20 different departure points of England would assemble south of the Isle of Wight, called Piccadilly Circus. On the night of June the 5th, the minesweepers began to clear the lanes, and shortly before midnight, 1,200 transport aircraft, C-47s, left England carrying 3 airborne divisions. 2 were landed here in the Cotentin Peninsula area, the 82nd and the 101st Airborne, and a British 6th Airborne Division landed here in Caen. Shortly before dawn, 1,000 bombers left England and dropped another 5,000 tons of bombs here on the coastal defenses here of Normandy. Bombardment commenced at 05:45, stopped at 06:25. From 5 battleships, 15 cruisers, 65 destroyers, and 2 monitors. The troops began arriving at the beach at 06:30. Now let's take a look at what Rundstedt's response was to all of this. About 3 o'clock in the morning, he began reports from the Normandy area that something was going on here. It kept coming in. About 4 o'clock, he notified the German Armed Forces High Command in Berlin of what was going on here in the Normandy area, but Hitler wasn't there. He was in Berchtesgaden in his mountain retreat in the Bavarian Alps, sound asleep. And he could not and would not be awakened. And it wasn't until 10 o'clock in the morning of June the 6th that he was informed of what was going on here, but he did not believe this was a real invasion. He thought it would come into the Pod Clay area. It wasn't until 2:30 in the afternoon that he ordered those divisions from Pod Clay down to the area, the division area itself, but they only didn't get there until the 7th of June. By then it was too late to stop what was going on. And they tend to congregate here around Calm. Oh, I'm sorry. I want to talk more now about the invasion itself. As you can see, there are 5 beaches: Utah, Omaha, Gold, Juneau, and Sword. They all had 3 things in common. All 5 of these beaches had 3 things in common: rough seas, high winds, and strong currents. The temperature was 55 degrees at the time of the invasion. The sky was overcast and cloudy, and the water was cold. You can imagine what it was like. A very chaotic situation resulted. Some landing craft landed at beaches which they were not assigned. Some troop units got mixed up with each other. Some landing craft that were supposed to be where they were, but they were thousands of yards away from where they're supposed to be. And so it was a very chaotic and confusing situation. Of course, the Germans weren't silent about all this thing. They used artillery, shot artillery shells at the invasion force themselves. Some landing craft were hit directly, killing and wounding everybody aboard. Some men got caught up on, landing craft got caught up on the underwater obstacles and had to disembark their troops yards away from the shore, and most of them drowned. It's a very, very sad situation, in fact. However, I'll talk to you about what happened on these beaches. I'll talk about the British and Canadians first. Sword Beach is the one that had the greatest penetration that day. 21 and 25 DD tanks, let's say duplex drive tanks, actually got ashore and cleared out the German defenses there, and were able to advance inland. However, on Golden Juneau, that was a totally different situation. The rough seas there prevented the troops from being landed at 6:30 in the morning. They had to wait an hour. And on Juneau Beach, they came in, the troops landed ahead of their armored support, and the bombardment from the sea missed the German defenses there, so they walked into a wall of fire, sustaining many casualties. Gold Beach, pretty much the same thing, except they launched the duplex drive tanks too close in the shore for them to do any good. Utah Beach, the area that's least defended by the Germans. Anyway, we suffered only 200 casualties here. However, when the landing craft got to shore, or got to the beach itself, they found there were 2,000 yards from where they were supposed to be. They were not able to link up with the 101st Airborne at Carentan. In fact, none of these beaches were, nothing really went right here. I'll talk more about that a little bit later. Omaha Beach, however, here was a cliff area. The cliffs went to sometimes over 100 feet high. And the Germans had 3 battalions of the 352nd Infantry Division located here. And they occupied those heights. Using machine guns and rifles, they were able to fire down directly on the disembarking troops, creating our forces sustained 2,400 casualties very quickly. The beach ran red with blood for several yards out from this beach because of all the Americans that were wounded and killed here. However, there were some tanks that landed there, and they were able to clear some obstacles, that type of thing away. However, they did not, their task was to link up the Gold Beach and go as far as the Bureau River, and then over here join with the Utah Beach and go like to capture Sherbrooke. However, one thing I want to say. The engineers on board on the beaches themselves did a magnificent job of trying to get rid of all of the beach obstacles, also trying to take care of the wounded, and the like. What was said about all of this, what one soldier said about what it smelled like on D-Day. He said, burning tanks, burning trucks and everything else, people screaming, and the smell of burning flesh. That is what D-Day smelled like. The whole episode of the Normandy invasion, the landing of June 6, 1944, was a testimony to the troops who participated in this event. They had a tremendous fighting spirit and a tremendous will to win. They believed in their cause and they did not give up. That's what can be said about it. Not just the Americans, but the British as well. Now let's take a look at the Cotentin Peninsula. By D+3, it was quite clear that Cherbourg was not going to be taken easily or quickly. Major General J. Lawton Collins was named on Utah Beach with the 7th Army, 7th Corps, was ordered to cut off the Cotentin Peninsula here, in this area here, to prevent the Germans from reinforcing this area. So he accomplished that task by reaching the western coast on the 17th of June. It took another 9 days of heavy fighting before he captured Cherbourg. By that time, the Germans had had time to destroy the port facilities, and what they did not or could not destroy, they booby-trapped. So it wasn't until September of 1944 before this port became operational. Now let's take a look at Caen. As you can see, Caen is a very important communication center. Once those Juno and beaches had consolidated and advanced on Caen, they ran into a fierce resistance from the 12th SS Panzer Grenadier Division called the Hitlerjugend and the German 21st Panzer Division, plus other units that come down from the Pas-de-Calais that were located here. A stalemate quickly developed, and the Germans carried out 4 major counterattacks to keep the Allies bottled up here. It wasn't until the 21st of July before Caen was captured by the British. But in the meantime, the city itself was virtually destroyed. Now I'll take a look at the breakout of Saint-Lô. I'll talk about George Patton quite a bit here because he figured this tremendously so. Anyway, George Patton had extensive experience in North Africa with the commanding officer of the 2nd Corps. He also was commander-in-chief of the invasion forces of Sicily. And he got involved, obviously, in a slacking incident or an incident there that created a lot of controversy about this man. But although people in the United States wanted to have his head, Eisenhower knew the value of him and kept him on, despite all the criticism. He was the one officer the Germans feared more than any of them because he was aggressive and simply what was the word I'm looking for? I can't think of the word for it, but anyway, he was unpredictable. You could not predict what this man was going to do. Let's look at Saint-Lô. Saint-Lô was bombed, as you can see here, was destroyed by 95% with, and had the nickname of King of the Ruins. It was captured on July the 9th, and as you can see, this is a map of July the 2nd, but July the 9th, the lodgement here had expanded considerably. With all of the material, the men had been collected here, the pressure was on to break out, and Saint-Lô was the place where we wanted to do it. It was the second largest place outside Cherbourg, and it was again a communication center, just as similar as Caen, and was necessary for the Allies. They wanted that for that purpose. On the 25th of July, Eisenhower, Bradley, Montgomery, and General Collins came up with a plan to have this area carpet bombed, which was a bright and clear day. And 2,000 bombers, escorted by 700 fighters, leveled this area, absolutely destroying the German forces located there. And the troops here were able to break out. And the Germans immediately found themselves in trouble, real trouble. But Caen captured on the 21st, the breakdown on the 25th. The German line of defense here was completely exposed. They had no defense in depth, no reserves, and could not be reinforced. They were on their own. All they could do was retreat. Patton's army was activated, the 3rd Army was activated on August the 1st when he captured Avranches. Now here's, look what he did here. He advanced from Alençon, captured on the 12th of August, Argenton on the 20th of August. You see what was going on? He was trying to envelop the entire 7th Army. And with the forces coming up here from Cherbourg area. They were being channeled toward the Falaise, what became known as the Falaise Pocket. What Patton wanted to do was simply destroy this army. However, when he got to Argenton, Bradley told him to stop. That was a tactical mistake. And Bradley later on admitted that it was a mistake. He was told to wait for General Montgomery's troops to advance up to this area and then snap the jaw shut in this pincer movement. But he had to wait 10 days. In the meantime, the remnants of 9 tank divisions, assorted infantry units were able to escape this trap. When the Canadians captured Trun and Chambois, the jaws of this pincer movement were slammed shut, trapping 100,000 German troops in this area. For 2 days, it was bombed unmercifully. Pilots flying over this area testified to the fact that they could smell the stench of death up to 20,000 feet. The pocket itself was liquidated 2 days later. When it surrendered, it was determined that 10,000 to 15,000 Germans had been killed, 30,000 to 50,000 captured, along with 500 tanks and assault guns, and another 20,000 to 50,000 had escaped. Anyway, this is the largest or the most serious defeat the Germans had experienced in World War II up to this point. It was a worse disaster than that of Stalingrad in Russia of February of 1943, when 90,000 German troops were marched in Soviet captivity out of an army of 320,000. The way now is open to capture Paris. On the 19th of August of 1944, the resistance in Paris, if I can find the, yeah, there it is, yeah, Paris right there, got you. It's hard to see from up here like this. Anyway, rose against our German oppressors, and it was rumored that the Parisian population was starving. And also, Hitler had ordered the commandant of Paris, General Dietrich von Koltitz, to destroy the city. Hitler wanted to see Paris wiped off the face of the earth. Didn't happen, of course, thank goodness. Anyway, de Gaulle asked Eisenhower to send forces there to capture the city anyway, because Eisenhower essentially wanted to bypass it. But anyway, with the 2nd Armored Division, Eisenhower ordered to take Paris, along with the 4th Infantry Division. They were able to take Paris, and after scattered fighting on the night of the 24th of August, Paris was declared a liberated city the next day. That was the end of Overlord. Let's take a look at the reason for victory in the Normandy area. German preparations along the Atlantic Wall were only partially finished. We've already talked about that. The sections under Operation Fortitude were successful, leaving the Germans obliged to defend a huge section of the coastline. Many divisions that were up there simply twiddled their thumbs and waited for orders that never came until later on. The Allies achieved and maintained air superiority, if not air supremacy, which meant that the Germans were unable to make observations of the preparation underway in Britain. Transport infrastructure in France was severely disrupted by Allied bombers and the French resistance, making it difficult for the Germans to bring up reinforcements and supplies. The opening of the German artillery barrage was off target or not concentrated enough to have any effect. That's because there was no organization, no central command. And as I said before, many of the guns located in those casements were taken out and sent to the Eastern Front and the like. And so the gunners were obliged only to shoot targets of opportunity. The opening of the German artillery, the specialized armor worked well except on Omaha Beach, providing close artillery support for the troops as they disembarked onto the beaches. The indecisiveness and overly complicated command structure of the German High Command was also a factor in the Allied success. That's partially due because of Adolf Hitler's meddling in military operations in France. He exercised what you might call micromanagement of every military operation that went on here, down to almost battalion level. And managing an operation like this, or any operation 750 miles away, would not achieve the desired outcome. It was a complete failure from start to finish. And that was the main reason why the Germans lost pretty much in Normandy. I would like to say a couple of things about the German army at this time. I think it needs to be said to be objective. It must be remembered that France and the Netherlands were rest areas for German forces fighting on the Eastern Front. Periodically, units were taken out from there, brought to France or the Netherlands, and to rest, recuperate, replenish, and relax. Then receive new troops or recruits, and then go through a training period before sent back to the meat grinder on the Eastern Front. By the time of the Normandy invasion, the troops that were stationed here were already battle-hardened, seasoned veterans of years of fighting on the Eastern Front. They knew how to deal with an adverse situation as well as privation, and no was doing without. And keep in mind one thing: they kept the Allies bottled up in the invasion area for 7 weeks, when the Allies wanted to capture Caen and St. Lo on the same day as the invasion. That's a testament to their tenacity and their determination. However, the issue was never in doubt once the Allies became ensconced on the European continent. There was only one option, only one outcome, and that was the fact that one day Germany would have to surrender. Now let's take a look at the casualties. This is one day. 114 aircraft were shot down, killed 1,465, wounded 3,184, missing 1920, captured 26, a total of 603 men. The losses on Omaha Beach were more than all the other beaches combined. Canadian, 946 casualties, the British 2,764 from all causes. The grand total of casualties for D-Day, 2,776 killed, 4,865 wounded, 2,609 missing, and 63 captured. A total of 10,313 casualties, amounting to 7% of the landing force. This was acceptable. Anything above 10% was not considered acceptable. German losses on D-Day were estimated between 4,000 and 9,000 men. Now, the entire campaign itself, from June 6th to the 25th of August of 1944, Allied casualties were 52,000. Wounded, missing, captured 178,000. Grand total of 230,000 casualties from all causes. German casualties from the same time period: killed 30,000, wounded 80,000, missing 210,000, including captured. A grand total of 320,000 casualties. The whole aggregate: 550,000 killed, wounded, missing, captured for both sides. In 3 months' time. You don't often hear about this, but what the French suffered. Killed during the liberation run were between 13,632 and 19,890. I don't know where they came up with those figures, but that's what they are. Casualties were between 11,000 and 19,000 Normans that were killed during the pre-invasion bombing alone. Total French casualties in World War II were 70,000. Landmines, unexploded ordnance, and continued to inflict casualties on the Norman population following the end of the campaign. Now here's a picture of Caen. Here's just an example of what the whole area looked like. Many cities and towns in Normandy were totally devastated by the fighting and the bombings. By the end of the Battle of Caen, there remained 8,000 livable quarters for a population of over 60,000. Of the 18 listed churches in Caen, 4 were seriously damaged and 5 were totally destroyed, along with 66 other listed monuments. In the Calvados department, that's the location of the Normandy beachhead itself, 76,000 citizens were rendered homeless. Of Caen's 210 pre-war Jewish population, only 1 survived the war. It took Caen 17 years to rebuild this city. It wasn't in 1962 that Caen itself was completely rebuilt from the horrors of World War II. It's a typical. Let's take what some of the veterans said about this then and now. I find this very interesting. We'll start the war right here. General Theodore Roosevelt Jr. He was the deputy commander of the 4th Infantry Division. A month later, he suffered a heart attack and died. He always walked around with a cane because he suffered from severe arthritis, and he tried to hide his heart condition from the Army. Anyway, General Dwight Eisenhower said this: should had the invasion itself failed, if any blame or fault attaches to the attempt, it's mine alone, taking personal responsibility. Paratrooper Harris President was popular back then. Hitler made only one mistake. When he built the Atlantic Wall, he forgot to put a roof on it. Colonel Charles G. Hannum said this: they're murdering us here. Let's move inland and get murdered. Private First Class Joe Lesniewski said this: "I don't feel that I'm any kind of a hero. To me, the work had to be done. I was asked to do it, so I did. When I lecture kids, I tell them the same thing." Colonel Paul Good said this on pre-invasion briefing in England at the time, said this: tell it to the men, you get your ass on the beach. I'll be there waiting for you and tell you what to do. There ain't anything in this plan that's going to go right. He was absolutely right about that. Lastly, Lieutenant Bud Common said this: "When people thank me for my service, I figure 3 years of my time is a cheap price to pay for this country. Nobody owes me a thing." Private Jack Porter said this at the time he was 97, as say the world currently, said this: "I'm very disappointed and I hate leaving the world feeling this way." I think we can all relate to that. Harry Reid said this, a British D-Day veteran, said, "It was a different world then. It was a world that required young men like myself to be prepared to die for a civilization that was worth living in." Major Richard Winter said this: "I cherish the memories of a question my grandson asked me the other day when he said, 'Grandpa, were you a hero in the war?' Grandpa said, 'No, but I served in a company of heroes.'" This concludes my presentation. For any questions, please ask.
The Rangers that scale the walls and the cliffs, do you know how many hours that took?
I have no idea. I know it took, I think it probably took several because of the enemy fire that was directed at them. They started out with 240 men. By the time they got to the top, there were only 90 men left. It was devastating, it really was. Yes, sir.
I saw the 3 month.
Oh, yeah.
I saw the 3 month time period, 210,000 missing German soldiers. What do you theorize? Or
You know what missing means, don't you?
It means they were blown up into pieces, or did they assimilate into the population?
No, that also includes capture, all of them.
I got a question. Now, he could have said the same thing, but I got hearing aid. When they say missing, are those soldiers that were just blown to pieces, or?
It hit by an artillery shell, blown up with a landmine.
But
There's nothing left to identify.
there's no accountability for them?
No, well, it's considered missing in action.
That's missing in action.
Terry, when the Allies were amassing all of this personnel in Britain for the invasion and all of the equipment, the landing craft, the tanks and so forth, did the Germans ever did they have surveillance? Did they ever try to bomb
No,
in that area?
that's a good question. No, not really, because they didn't have the aircraft to do it. There was no way they could find what's going on in England, and except for many of the fire squadrons were taken out and sent to the back to Germany to protect the country from incessant Allied attacks that went on day and night. And what they had was sent to the Eastern Front. As far as bombers concerned, they may have carried out some reconnaissance things, but not as far as bombing missions. I don't think that was possible.
You mentioned the Germans attacked when we were practicing the landing, and it was kept quiet.
That's correct. I
I've
can
never
tell you
heard
more.
that before. Why was it kept quiet? Do you know?
Security. I was paranoid about the fact that Germans could learn where the landing would take place. The troops that practiced there at Slapton Sands were associated with the Utah Beach landing. And the thing was, the Germans had picked up radio traffic in the area where this was taking place. They sent 9 PT boats or SE boats, around to check it out. They saw what was going on. They attacked the land forces there. They sank 1 LST, killing, taking everybody with them. 1 blew up because of the gas was aboard, and 1 had his stern shot off, but still made it back to port. The tragedy of this whole thing was that the Army misinformed the families of these people that died. The bodies were taken and buried in England, and were allowed to be, the individual soldier could be sent back to the States if the family wanted them, and that was done. However, when it came to the telling what happened, in some cases the Army outright lied to the families about this. That is one of the tragedies of it. That's kept secret 43 years.
I never heard of it.
I have a question. You mentioned that the Allies respected Rommel. Was it because he did the Atlantic Wall so brilliantly, or?
No. the Allies respected Rommel for the way he conducted himself in North Africa. He tried to take care of the captured as well as the people that needed, the soldiers that needed medical care. He saw that they were cared for. He saw that the captured were fed the same ration basis the Germans were. And this carried, the British troops that were captured by him thought highly of the man because of that. And that carried over into the higher levels of the British High Command itself. In fact, Rommel was the only man whose name was actually mentioned in the House of Commons during the speech Churchill made in January of 1942. Indicate how that he was a fine general, regarded him as a fine general. The only one.
I've got another question. So the American soldiers that were buried in France, did the family have a choice of bringing them back, or why was they buried there?
Well, that's a good question. I really don't know a good answer about that. I would think that there was simply that they were buried there on the spot as a commemoration for the efforts that were made to take the areas in which these cemeteries are located, particularly in France, the 29th Infantry Division particularly. I feel sure that if the family had made an attempt, I think that would have been honored. Other than that, they were left there, what I think. Yes, sir.
Now when you were talking about General Patton's ground assault, he was ordered to stop so he can meet up with General Montgomery. Was also part of the reason why he was ordered to stop was because he was advancing faster than the supplies could come
No,
in?
that came later. No, that didn't have anything to do with it. Eisenhower was behind that decision, basically trying to cut off his gasoline. No, Bradley ordered him specifically to halt there at Argenton to wait for the British. When Patton wanted to go ahead and slam shut that pincer movement and destroy this entire army.
I see.
That was a real mistake on Bradley's part. He admitted so later.
Terry, do you know how many American cemeteries there are in all of Europe?
Oh, it's hard to say. I don't know offhand. I don't know. I'd say
I was just there
full of
last year.
major ones. I'm not sure.
I could have told you.
I'm
World
not
War
sure.
One, World War II, yeah.
That's a big one in Luxembourg.
The beautiful overseas, Omaha Beach too.
Yeah.
That's where the Roosevelts are buried, yeah.
Didn't Rommel eventually commit suicide? Was it
Yes, he
due
did.
to the failure
Yes, he did.
of
I'll
the
tell you.
defense, or was it he was afraid of being
No.
treated as a war criminal?
No, by no means. He was never been treated as a war criminal. No, by no means. Except for he's probably the only German officer respected by the Western Allies. It's a tragic story, really. Rommel's chief of staff, General Heinz Speidel, tried to recruit him for the resistance to Adolf Hitler. He refused to get involved in that because he thought it was during the time of war to go against you, and the head of state was really against his principles. So instead, when General Karl Heinrich von Stoltenberg tried to commit suicide, he was a military commandant of France. He was involved directly in the plot to kill Hitler. He tried to commit suicide and only blinded himself. And while he was lying on the operation table under anesthesia, he kept saying the name Rommel, Rommel, Rommel. And therefore they took it to mean that he was part of the conspiracy. And that was not the case. However, that was enough for Hitler to suspect that he was. And he ordered his family, he ordered him a choice. Either commit suicide or face public trial, in which case Hitler could not guarantee the safety of his family. And Rommel was a very great family man. He always wrote his wife whenever he was away from home. He always wrote his wife every day. Other people don't know that. But anyway, he was at home at the time two officers came to administer him poison. They gave him time to say goodbye to his wife and his son. And the name of the two generals were named Wilhelm Burgdorf and Ernst Meisel from the personnel office. He was taken by car to a spot not very far from town there and administered poison, and that's the reason why he committed suicide. The eulogy at his funeral, which was given, he was given a state funeral, was carried out by Field Marshal Garrett from Rumstead. Yeah. He was cremated, and I saw his gravesite in Harlingen, and there's a big cross there with the stamps of his, embossments of his decorations, and that type of thing. He was cremated.
Terry, a lot of these soldiers, or some of the soldiers that were disembarking off those landing craft, we've read that some of them drowned at that time. Is that because the landing craft didn't get close enough?
That's right. Thanks for bringing it up. Yes, that's exactly right. They got hung up on those underground water beach obstacles and had disembarked treated before. They have been drowned because of the equipment they were carrying and the like, so that's what happened to a lot of them, yes.
Hey Terry, how much of the German staff in World War II had actually had experience in World War I? I know
I'd say
Hitler was just a private.
most of them, most of them did, yeah. Most of them
The
were.
Wehrmacht guys or the SS guys had?
SS not so much unless you get the higher ranking officers in the SS, not the enlisted man, no. The SS wasn't really formed until 1935 when Paul Hauser, and then, but it was very difficult to get to the SS. You had to be a certain height, could not have any fillings in your teeth, could not wear glasses or anything like that. You had to be a physical specimen of health. And you also must prove your ancestry back to 1750, that you had no Jewish blood in your background. And I know people like that. Women went the same way. We married to the SS people, had to prove also their ancestry back to 1750, that they had no Jewish blood in their background. They couldn't marry. I met people like that.
You know, I'd read where the German POWs on the Eastern Front, the ones that weren't worked to death in salt mines or uranium mines, they weren't repatriated until the late 50s. Is there any truth to that?
Yeah, exactly. There were two releases. One in 1949, one in 1955, 56. Yes, that's true. But this is quite a lot of people don't know this. The latest repatriation from Soviet labor camps or prison camps was in 1962, and they were Dutch, not German. I met some that were also repatriated in 1950. They spent 10 years in Soviet captivity in 1955. I corresponded with some of them. They were in Soviet captivity for about 13 years. Particularly general officers, the commanding officer. See, the chief of staff to the 6th Army Stalingrad was General Arthur Schmidt. He was captured in 1943, and he wasn't released until 1955. I had a chance to correspond with him and ask him about his treatment. He survived all of that. He said basically the enlisted people were ones that died like flies, but the officers treated somewhat different than the enlisted people.
The ships that they brought in at Omaha and so forth, they sunk them to create an artificial reef.
Yes, the mulberries you're talking about.
Yeah, how many of those were there?
2.
Just 2?
Yeah, the one at Omaha Beach was destroyed in a storm that came up in the 19th of June, lasted 3 days. It wasn't anchored properly, and the Allies declared it inoperable, so they let it go.
But do you know how many ships actually sunk to do that?
No, I don't know about ships being sunk. I just know the Mulberry itself was destroyed.
Okay.
It's simply there to provide protection and breakways for ships to unload,
Yeah.
just to try to keep calm seas for the most part.
You mentioned the Pluto. Was
Pluto.
an underground? That was an undersea pipeline.
That's correct.
POW
Connected
problem.
England with the invasion beaches.
So they had some kind of fuel terminal or
Oh, yeah.
something
Oh, yeah.
with bladders or something.
Yeah, yeah.
They also had this platform that they made so they can carry supplies over. It has a name for it, and I can't remember what it was. But there was
They had
we were
different
ready.
names. They had different parts of that mulberry. They had this thing that you may have seen that looked like the middle of it looked like I don't know what you call it, a paint of some kind. They call that the Swiss roll. I don't know why. Basically to create lanes for ships to come in there and unload and leave.
As a World War II historian, have you read or studied anything about a castle in Western Austria that French political officials had been taken and imprisoned by the Nazis there, and that actually ended up, as they tried to send American troops to recover them, that was the last battle of the war? Have you read?
I'm not familiar with that. I'm familiar with the fact that many of them were kept in a place called the castle for the British, the German royal family was in Hechingen. That's a beautiful castle, and many were kept there. Some were kept in separate camps for so-called special individuals, such as high-ranking, highly politicized political prisoners and things like that. But in Austria, I'm not that familiar with anything like that. I'm sure there is, but I just not right off anything like that.
Have you seen the documentary Camp Confidential that's just recently been released about the, I think it was formed 1942 at Fort Hunt, Virginia, where they took the young Jewish survivors and had them interrogate captured German, I guess, POWs?
Not that particularly. I know some other things that went on like that, but,
And I guess it was top secret, we just.
I don't
heard-
doubt that.
Yeah.
There was one camp that the United States ran in Arizona, away from everything, everybody, that they brought captured German prisoners there that they wanted to interrogate. And in that particular camp, or that prison basically, they did not follow the rules of Geneva Convention. They were tortured when everything else happened to them to get information from them. That was kept secret also for many years.
Were the Germans still shooting the buzz bombs into England during or had their industrial base been pretty much destroyed by bombing consistently when D-Day happened?
No, that didn't. That was still in development at the time. That came a little bit later, not much later though. I believe they had launching sites from Armagh, maybe farther north up around the Pas-de-Calais area, and also they launched V-2s from Holland against Germany at that time. I've seen film of that.
In your correspondence with some of these people, especially Germans, did they ever mention about the exodus to South America? Anything about that?
No, nothing like that. You're talking about the people that left Germany after the war to go to Argentina and places like that. No, but the Catholic Church is involved in a lot of that, believe it or not. There's a bishop, Alice Hudal, who believed that the survivors of the Third Reich, basically high-ranking officers, should be needed to carry out another Fourth Reich against the Russians, and that's how his thinking was. And he helped facilitate the exodus of some of these people to Argentina. Melo was one of them, as well as Eichmann and other people like that. Walter Ralph was another one. He was responsible for the deaths of 900,000 Russians on the Eastern Front. Yeah, he survived the war. He lived in Argentina and died of natural death. Things like that.
Hey Terry, have you read Bill O'Reilly's book about killing Patton?
No, I haven't. I don't. He tends to write pulp. Well, it's pulp literature. I mean, it's popular literature, and a lot of it's anecdotal. And I like to see research to back it all up. I'm not so sure he has all that there.
Do you have any hypotheses, ideas that was Patton considered a threat?
No, I think the thing was, a lot of people don't realize that General Patton was very anti-Semitic. And that came out later in terms of the war. But I think that the fact was that he too much of a lightning rod had to bring him back to the United States for burial. And kept him be buried. He's buried in Luxembourg.
So you think his death was accidental?
I'm not seeing anything to contradict that, really. I think it was accidental. Personally, I do. There's some question, but I think it was accidental. These days, you don't know what the federal government's going to do or what they can do. Anything else, please ask. I'll answer the best I can.
Very good presentation.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure, it's an honor to be here. Anyway, I hope you got something from it, learned something from it, how brave our troops were, not just our troops, but the British as well. But they didn't give up, and they always did their best under all the circumstances. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.